everybody, my name is Kristen Guyana, and today I wanted to talk about poets who shaped history and literature. So according to our Kansas business, Maya Angelou's I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings stayed on New York Times bestseller for 2 years. As you can kind of see, she had an incredible impact on a lot of people. Today I'll be talking about two of my favorite poets who not only talked about life, but they changed it as well, Walt Whitman and Maya Angelou. Both of them used poetry in a way that could be considered controversial. They talked about freedom, equality, individuality. They talked about realism and identity, which brought them a lot of attention. So, when we think about poetry, what exactly do we think of? We think of love, we think of heartbreak, right? Typical. But poetry is so much more that meets the eye, right? Whenever I first heard of both of these poets, I was in middle school and learning about poetry in English class. I fell in love automatically with poetry and the thoughts of poetry, and automatically I started writing poetry about what? Love and heartbreak. But it's so much more than that, and I still write poetry to this day. I do think that these two poets they're underrated. I feel like they aren't talked about enough, especially for the change that they brought to not only literature but society, culture, history. So let's get right into it. According to Whitman Unbound, Walt Whitman and the New Poetry, and Whitman Unbound, Democracy and Poetic Form, 1912 through 1931. Walt Whitman broke the old rules of poetry. He used free verse a lot, which means, like, we think of poetry, we think of rhyming all the time, right? Well, he said to hell with that, basically, and he wrote free verse poetry. He broke the rules of rhythm and rhyme, and he brought a lot of controversial to him. And so a lot of everyone referred to him as the father of free verse. And so I typically look at him for inspiration because of this. Because as a poet myself, I always thought I had to rhyme, which is hard to do. It feels right, but it's hard to do every single time. And it doesn't need to be that way. And thankfully to Whitman, he brought this change to a lot of poets. He inspired a lot of poets like Ezra Pound and Carl Sandburg. I'm pretty sure many, many more to come, and who has came to be. Because of his poetry talking about real life people, real problems, realism, he just brought a lot of controversial to his life, but he was real well known for this. His poems like "Oh Captain, My Captain" is still influence on our pop culture today, and even used in Dead Poet Society. Who's seen that movie? Because that is one of my top favorite comfort movies that I have to go back and watch every single year, a couple times a year. And if you are a person who loves literature and Robin Williams and just that whole aesthetic, you will love this movie. And this is how I found Walt Whitman himself. I seen this movie in middle school, fell completely in love with it, and I push people to watch this movie because it's so good. But Robin Williams, he is a professor and he quotes a lot of Walt Whitman. So he brought light to Walt Whitman in this movie, and it brought it to me, and I'm sure millions of others who have watched this movie as well. Clarence Brown points out that Whitman influenced early 20th century poets by showing that free verse could be used instead of relying on strict style. Patrick Redding further explains that Whitman's poetry reflected democracy not just in its ideas but its very form. According to Maya Angelou, writer and activist in Violence and Intimidation as a Means of Social Control, historical overview of race relations in the South, and Understanding I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, a student casebook to issues, sources, and historical documents, Maya Angelou and her journey. Now, Maya Angelou was more out there, more media-wise. It could be also because she's more in the newer generations to come. They were both in different decades, right? So Maya Angelou, she grew up in a segregated Arkansas, right, and overcame great hardships. At just 15, she became San Francisco's first black female cable car conductor, which was huge, seriously huge. You know, we think about people who have it bad and that just stayed down. No, not Maya. Maya got up and she pushed. Her voice completely changed the lives not only for black women but for women and anyone in general. Her 1969 autobiography, I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, confronted racism and trauma. And in this book of hers, she goes very into depth with her childhood traumas and racism and kind of what she went through in life and what she was seeing going on around her. It was a way that she empowered not only herself, but she gave voices for everyone else around her, which was very huge. Now, she was a civil rights activist, not just a poet, a civil rights activist. She used her voice and poetry and words to push for justice, to push for freedom, to push for having her and other people's voices heard. She's worked with Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X. It blows my mind. Her background coming from nothing to something is truly, truly, truly inspiring. Now, she was even reciting poetry at Bill Clinton's inauguration. How amazing is that? And look at these beautiful pictures to kind of back up everything that I have. Now, I wish I had the same for Walt Whitman. I just had pictures of him. But I do believe, like I said, he was in an older century, older generation, decade, so there wasn't a lot of pictures going on there, I'm guessing. But I really loved looking up these for Maya Angelou. Maya Angelou's strength inspired many people, so let's not forget the impact that she had on culture, history, and literature itself. Whitman showed poetry that could be free and democratic. Anyone's voice could matter. Jess Ardrey adds that Angelou went on to publish more than 30 books. She received over 50 honorary degrees and earned Presidential Medal of Freedom from President Barack Obama. Isn't that amazing? According to Jess Ardrey, Maya Angelou's I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings has translated into 10 languages and is still being taught in classrooms around the world. Angelou's poetry showed that it could heal, it could empower, and seek justice. Whitman's Leaves of Grass and Angelou's Caged Bird are still studied worldwide in classes, in literature, just around the world, by poets, by teachers, professors, you name it. They still leave a big impact in the world and literature and history of how we see it, which is truly iconic, honestly. Together they use poetry to stand for not only what they believed in literature, but what they believed in life as well. Walt Whitman and Maya Angelou lived in different times, but both left permanent mark on culture and history. Their words remind us that poetry isn't just art, but it's to create change as well. It's not just about love and heartbreak when it comes to poetry, okay? As they impacted the world through their voices, I hope my speech inspired you to think about how powerful your words can be as well. Thank you so much for being here.